Hello, it's Ivan from Ivan Does Stuff. I realised that on all my videos so far, all two of them, I haven't really explained why I'm doing this. It's just kind of Ivan does stuff. Well, why does Ivan do stuff? Um, I'm a kind of frustrated engineer. I love building things. I've always loved creating stuff. I started my life kind of discovering Lego at a very young age, and I've always loved building things and constructing things and understanding how things work. Um, and coupled with, I was very lucky growing up that my dad is still with me. Well, not with me, because, hi dad, no, he's not over there. Still with us. So my dad is a massive original IT geek, and he's a huge influence on my life, partly from computer games. You know, we were really lucky. We had a PC back in 1986. I remember us having a Mac before that. We had computer games on like things like the Dragon 32, Dragon 64, which is a bit like it was like a BBC. It ran a form of BASIC, so it was a big influence in my life, and that along with cars and motorbikes. I have always loved cars and motorbikes. My first love is always cars. I remember him testing me about cars and manufacturers and engines and stuff in the car, which I always used to love. Anyway, always loved cars. So I was lucky enough to learn to drive at 17, and got a car as soon as I could. Probably the shittest car I ever owned, which was a B-Reg Volkswagen Polo, registration B 269 BOE. It was crap. It was so shit that when you put it into try to go into first, it had no gate between first and reverse, and so at a junction, the only reason I know I was in reverse was someone would beep me because my light would come on, my reversing light. And then I mean, I like motorbikes as well, but a friend of mine took me out on his, I think it was YZR 750, and then I was smitten. I was absolutely smitten, and I had to get a motorbike. I had to have one that was so fast. It was supercar performance for money that even I could afford as a 20-year-old who just started work. So that's when I got into bikes, and it was in 1998, which is when they changed the law on motorcycles, where you had to be 21 to ride anything. And luckily, I was 21 in the May. I got my license in the July, and I immediately went out and bought a Honda CB 500, which was parallel twin. Allegedly half a Fireblade engine. I don't know how true that is. I expect it probably was. There's probably shared a lot of parts, pistons, etc. Slightly bored out. And it was a lot of fun. I paid probably too much money for it. It was an M-Reg. It had a drum rear brake. But do you know what? As a first bike, it was so fun. It was 57 horsepower. At the time, they had a race series. So that was a 95 bike, and I bought it. So it was a couple of years old when I bought it. Yeah, it was quite, it was a 500cc, so me being a bigger guy, it was quite fun, about 30 something foot-pounds of torque. But up to 90, it was quick, and I liked the look. It was sort of looked like a Bandit, a bit more simple. It was a bit of a parts bin jobby, but it was good. It handled well. Quick up to 90. I think I had an indicated, allegedly, I will say allegedly, an alleged indicated 130 on it, which is probably more like 120. That was absolutely me flat on the tank. It was a lot of fun though. It was a lot of fun. 2 power bands, and actually that bike is why I'm going to come around to the bike I'm going to talk about today. I then got into my super bikes. I then so I had a CBR 600, which is when the CBR 600s were one of the best bikes in the world. It was just a fantastic all-rounder. It was a J-Reg. I think it had been slightly tweaked because it would kind of lift the front wheel ever so slightly in first gear. I think it had the rev limiter changed slightly. I'm not entirely sure. It might have just been a good one. It was a really nice black grey red wheels, red seat. It was a nice bike. It was a really competent bike. You know, so going from the CB500 to the CBR6, you're going from about 57 horsepower to that one was probably realistically 90 brake, but that's quick. That's quick to 120. That is, you know, 0 to 60 probably with me on it 4 and a bit seconds. Keep up with most fast cars. Handled really well, really comfy. Made by Honda, so not really any problems with it. In fact, the only problem I ever had with it was to do with the battery, which you can't really blame Honda for. I had that for a little while, and then I really decided that I wanted something properly quick, and I bought GSXR 750WP, which was an oil-cooled one. So it was when the GSXR 750s were getting a bit porky. But it was quick, just under 120 brake. Best brakes of any bike I've ever had. Nissin 4 pots. Oh my god, that thing stopped. And it was quick. It was really fast. Ridiculously fast. I won't say how fast I got on it. But had I been caught, I would have been banged up for a long time. And I think it's the fastest I've ever been on a vehicle ever. It was quick. It was really quick, and that was really where my love of Suzuki's came from. And I do personally, they are the bike for me. For me, they're the most sporty, best handling, good all rounders. Anyway, and then I had a period where my work wasn't particularly great, and I just didn't have a bike for a little while. So fast forward a couple of years, and I was actually in a position to buy another bike, and so I decided, weirdly, and it was a little bit strange, to buy not one, not two, but 2.5. I don't know how you do a half. How do you do a half? 1.5. Anyway, 2.5 Jawas. Jawa 350. Are they twins? I think they're twins. I can't remember now. They're 2-strokes anyway. I bought them from a guy in Shepton Mallet. And they were all right, and I made some money on them actually. Not a lot, but enough. I wanted something to tinker with. I had a garage at the time. I wanted something to tinker with, something to get back on a bike. And there's a really funny feeling where you've not ridden for, I must have not ridden for about 5 or 6 years. Like, not been on a bike, nothing. I went to pick these bikes up with my kit on and everything. And I'm sat on the bike, about to ride home, which wasn't a long journey. It was probably 10, maybe 15 minutes going, I'm not sure I can remember how to ride. As it happened, it was all right. And it's funny how they say you never forget how to ride a bike, because within 6 minutes, I was trying to keep up with a Ducati, which I had no hope in hell. You know, this thing was a 30 horsepower, 28 horsepower, I think it was, 2-stroke. And you know when you're going about the right speed because it stops pumping blue smoke out. But they were a lot of fun. One of them actually was a really nice orange colour, and I've referenced the orange before. It's my favourite colour. So it was an orange one, a silver one, and a parts bin one. And I think I paid $550 for the 2.5 of them, and I think I made like 200-300 quid ultimately on bits and bobs. I actually did really well on the bits. I remember selling a set of carbs for like 80 quid or something ridiculous. Anyway, it got me kind of back into motorcycling, albeit you can't really kind of call them a motorbike. I'm not sure if my mum and dad remember this, but I remember going around to their house and all the keys were the same. They looked like, in fact, I might have what they look like here, possibly. I'm not sure if I've got one. It looked a bit like yeah, here we go. That, which is a 5mm audio jack, that was the key. This isn't the actual key, but it's as near as damn it, this would have started it, with a small notch in it. And they were all the same, and you could turn the ignition on, pull the key out, and it still ran. So clearly the Czechs weren't overly bothered about security. They were also one of the few bikes that de-evolved. The early ones came with premixes. So for those who don't know about 2-strokes, 4-stroke, which is what everything is now, really. Go to the petrol pump, fill it up with your 4-stroke, glug, 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 away you go. 2-stroke has to be mixed with oil. So the fuel itself lubricates the engine rather than having a separate sump. That's the real pigeon how it works. So on the sophisticated 2-strokes, they have a little tank which you fill with 2-stroke oil, and then the fuel goes in, it mixes together, and away you go. Jawa The original ones, that's how they worked, but they had so many problems with it, they took that out, and you then had to mix your own two-stroke. So you put the fuel and then put the mixture. I had loads of problems with them. They shared parts with Skodas. That's kind of like how they were. And I had some. I could do a whole thing about the weird stories about these things that happened. I did quite like them. They were one of those really sort of. They had a lot of character. Now, often when people are really annoying, they go, "He's got a lot of character." These did have a lot of character. I liked also the fact that you could only do so like a certain length journey, or more to the point, you had to plan your journeys over how many times you had to stop, because they had drum brakes all around. So again, if you're not used to drum brakes, which probably a lot of people aren't these days, disc brake, do you know what? You've got to push it pretty hard to fade. You really got to be racing it on a motorbike. An average rider or even a good rider on the road, you're going to struggle to get the thing to fade. They're really efficient. Drum brakes, I reckon 3 stops in and it was going to start to fade. So you had to really plan your journeys and definitely plan when you were going to slow down. So I had the Jawas. That was fine. They were fun. Sold them. And then I had a bike I really wish I hadn't sold. I bought a Yamaha TRX 850, which is an interesting bike in the sense that Yamaha produced it to compete with the Ducati 900 SS. So it had a tri frame, looked quite interesting. In fact, I might, if I start getting really good on the editing, I might put some of these pictures of these bikes up so people know what I'm talking about. Because I appreciate if you're not as geeky, bikey as me, you going, what the fucking hell is he talking about? Sorry, what the flipping hell? Beep, I'll beat that one out. What is he talking about? So, the TRX is interesting. It's a parallel twin, which means the pistons are running together. Like half, most people here who are watching will have a 4-cylinder. Inline 4, you got 4 pistons, up and down. Ooh, they don't go like that. That'd be weird. I mean, the engine would be huge if they went like that. They don't, they go up and down. It's a parallel twin. But what they did was they changed the firing order from, I think a parallel twin should fire at 180 degrees, so it's to do without the crankspool mount. Again, I'm probably getting this wrong. If there are people out there who know more about cars than me, either correct me and be nice, or just admit, this is real pigeon stuff. So they changed the firing order to fire like a V-twin, which is quite a different character. But it was a good bike, and it was, I bought it from a guy really close to where my mum and dad live. He had loads of bikes. It was lovely to ride. It was, so 850, obviously loads of torque. Not massively powerful, about 75 horsepower. So a bit like riding a pretty slow 600. However, with so much grunt. Really efficient to ride, actually. 60 to the gallon. Fun to ride. A little bit basic, some of the parts. But do you know what? Loads of character to ride. You could trundle along at 5th gear, open the throttle, blah, 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 and it would just pull. It was really fun. And I made money on that bike, and I didn't have it very long. And in fact, I think I paid $11.50 for it and kept it for about 6 months, made 12, sold it for $12.50. Now you can't buy one for less than 2.5 grand. They're really good bikes, and I think it's because they're quite different. If you wanted a 600 but you wanted something with a bit more torque, or you're like me and then it's a good bike to go for. It's a bit different, it's a bit interesting, and I like stuff like that, a little bit quirky. It was a good bike, really fun to ride, comfortable as well. I actually, when I bought it, I rode from Liverpool down to Bristol, which is 200 and something miles through Wales, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, fantastic bike. So had that little while, and then I bought one of my dream bikes, which was a GSX-R 750 S-Rad, and I wanted either the last of the carburetted versions or the first of the injection versions. So we're talking 97, 98. I actually got a really good deal on a last of the carb versions, which is a WS, I think it was. 125 plus horsepower. That thing was, I think the most impressive thing about it was, yes, it was seriously, seriously quick, but it was so capable. You could throw it into corners. Now, for people who ride superbikes, because I'm a bit of a super sport superbike fan, for me, riding a bike, you've got to have faith in the front, well, what the front wheel's doing. You you can't go into a roundabout hard. You can't go into a corner hard if you think that front tire is going to slide away from you. It's a real odd thing, and it takes some time to get confidence in the front. And it's not like a pretentious thing. It's a thing. You know, I've had bikes where the front ends just felt weird. The GSX-R, you got on it and you could go fast because you could brake hard. You could go into corners hard, and you always felt it was infinitely better than you would ever be. Plus it was quick, plus it sounded good, plus it looked good. You know, probably if I had the choice, it might have been better to go for the injection one, but I didn't. The carb one is probably the best carburetted 750 made. It was a brilliant bike, and again, I made money on that as well. I don't know what was happening, you know. God, when did I have that? 10 years ago or so, 11 years ago, 12 years ago. I just was buying these bikes and blah. And then I sold that. I sold it because I moved in with my current partner and ended up buying a Jag XJS V12, which was a great car, but that's for a whole nother story. And then about 5 years ago, I wanted to get another motorbike, and I bought my dream bike, which is the bike I'm never going to sell. It was bought for it was a bargain. It was a one owner from new, which for a 20-year-old bike, as it was at the time, 20-year-old? No, quite 20-year-old. 17-year-old bike. Something like that. You know, you just don't get them. You don't get bike. People just don't hold on to bikes for that long. Anyway, TL1000S, 1998 edition. I'm not going to talk about it in great detail because I want to do a whole section about it. Because one of the things I want to talk about on these videos is my project. You know, I'm a project guy. And that's probably my big project. It's been going on for 5 years. I'm probably coming up to halfway. I go through periods where I do nothing. I had 18 months where I procrastinated about one problem, which ultimately took me 2 hours to fix. And that's just kind of, you know, it happens when you're doing stuff. I get distracted. 1 minute I'm you know, changing the suspension on a bike. The next minute I've decided I'm going to build a NAS and re-network the whole house, which is what's happened over the last week. Anyway, so TL1000S. Again, for those who don't know, for me, the reason I wanted a TL1000S, it was a real, it was a real split between, did I want another GSX-R 750? Probably one of the later S-Rads. And I can't remember now. I used to know which was the best one. Maybe it was the 98 or 99 S-Rad, which I knew was 130 brake. It was quick. It worked really well. It was a fantastic machine out the box, and you could make it a few percent better, 5% better maybe. You know, you could customize it, exhaust, make it look a bit better, tidy it up, tweak a few things, obviously get the suspension for you done. What I will say at this point is I like 750s over 600s because being, as I am, probably all kitted up about 20 stone. I know I don't look it. I've got a big freaking head. This is all, like, I've actually got tiny body below this. My head is like, it's like Humpty Dumpty. The camera's about, I don't know, 10 meters away. Big head. Anyway, I'm about 20 stone all kitted up. So for me, a 600 struggles just because I'm heavy. So for me, a 750 is basically a 600 for fat people. Yeah. Which is why I'd always go for a 750 over a 600. That being said, the GSX-R 750 S-Rad, better suspension, better brakes, a stiffer swing arm. So all those things are better. So it was a toss-up between that and then my dream bike, which is the TL1000. Now, the reason I wanted a TL1000 is it gained a nickname of the Killer TL. The reason it had a nickname for the Killer TL is that the opening weekend it was launched, I think, in the first or second weekend, it killed three or four journalists, which is horrible and it's really quite sad. But because the sort of person I am, I was like, that sounds an interesting bike. The reason it's an interesting bike is most V-twins, so I should explain what it is. It's a 1000cc Suzuki V-twin, the first V-twin they've made. It was, I think, their first bike to come out only with injection. So the GSX-R had moved from carburetors to injection. The TL came out with injection. Most V-twins, so the Ducati 916, which is what it was competing against, narrow and quite long. What Suzuki did was they offset the suspension. They actually split the damper and the spring. Normally they're combined. They split them apart. And the bike is very wide and very short. Relatively short, anyway. That gives you a few problems. It's a very torquey engine. I mean, I've seen figures, and you wouldn't know unless you dynoed your own bike, but I've seen figures up to 80 foot-pounds of torque, which I can believe. Now, 80 foot-pounds of torque is the same torque as you get on a 1200 Bandit. Now, you have to bear in mind, this thing, I've never opened it up completely. What I will say, and this is on my bike, I've had the front wheel lift at 30 miles an hour in third gear on a light throttle. And it wasn't even trying. So you can tell, short bike, lots of torque, that can be problematic. It's also problematic when it's got a steep steering rake, which is what it had. So, cut a long story short, they had to do some recalls on it. But the bike itself is nowhere near as good as a GSX-R 750. Stock, you'd keep up with one on the straights, but as soon as you hit a set of twisties, not a hope in hell. So what I set myself a project to do was, could I make a TL1000S as good, or in the ballpark, as a GSX-R 750? Taking money out of the equation, and that's the project I've been doing. That's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. But I'm gonna talk about it in more detail in a separate thing, because what I wanted this video to be was talk about what bikes I've had, talk about why I'm doing these videos, and also as a lead-in to the video I do want to talk about. So, I like super bikes. I like super sport bikes. I like bikes that are interesting. I've never been a big fan of things like BMWs or Enduros or anything like that. So, I want to talk about the bike that I bought 2 years ago. 2 years ago? No, less than that. A year ago. A year in February, so a year and a half ago. It was a BMW Enduro, which is farcical. If 21-year-old me could see 43-year-old me, or 41-year-old me as I was when I bought it, I'd go, what are you thinking? What on earth are you thinking? That is everything you can't stand. Things change, people change, and there are reasons why I bought it. So my next video will be about the reasons why I bought this bike and why I love it so much, and why it's called Big Tasty, and why I call it my unicorn bike, and why it's so good to ride. So in essence, I'll do a recap. I do stuff because I like building things. I like doing projects. I like anything technical. I like particularly anything I can solder. If I could do one job, it would be tinning. For you, those you don't know, wire, solder, and you prep the wire by putting bits of solder on it. And it's called tinning. And I love it. It's my favourite thing to do in the world. I find it really relaxing. Might be why I've gone mad, because obviously the fumes aren't good for you. But I love doing that. So, motorbikes, cars. Car-wise, not particularly interesting at the minute. I'm running a Honda CR-V, but good car. That's got its own story, but we won't go into that. Tech stuff, geeky stuff, anything really that I come across that I like to build. So the aim for these videos is me just kind of conveying and talking and discussing my love of engineering stuff and building things. I think it's important to know as well that I always wanted to build cars and tune cars, and same with motorbikes, and in some ways that's kind of what I'm doing now, as a hobby. When I started 20 years ago, I didn't have a bloody clue. And I think it's important for people to know that you give stuff a go. Often it's not that difficult. I think from a car point of view, and it does translate to motorbikes, the program that helped me the most to give me confidence was actually Wheeler Dealers. Not the new ones, the old ones with a guy called Ed China. Because when he goes through and repairs cars, he's really good from an engineering point of view, but he's learnt it all himself. And often you'll go, oh yeah, that's quite simple. And often it's the troubleshooting that's difficult. And getting your head into, right, how's this working? Right, I want it to do this. Why is it not doing this? What are the steps in between? So I'm in no way, I'm not a good engineer by any stretch of the imagination. I like trying stuff. I break loads of stuff. But I learnt a lot. And in 20 years of doing bits and bobs on motorbikes and cars and computers and retro stuff, I've got to the stage now where often I know what I can do. I know what I'm prepared to try, but I'm also happy to fail. And sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes it can be costly, but most of the time it isn't. Most of the time you succeed. You do your research, you work out how things work. There is a story I will tell very briefly around a bolt. Doesn't sound interesting. Bolt called Bronson. I recently changed, 2 years ago I changed the exhaust system on the TL. Got a great deal on it. Again, I'll save that for the other story. That doesn't matter. Now, I got 3 bolts I had to take out. So anyway, 2 bolts in the front I had to take out. First one was alright, came out. Now you have to remember this is a stainless steel bolt into an aluminium head, and what happens over time through heat cycles is they chemically bond. And bear in mind this bike is 20 years old, so I'm just looking up to see if I can find Bronson. It doesn't matter, he's a little bolt, and I'll tell you why I call him Bronson. Anyway, the second bolt sheared. Now this is a bolt that's underneath a bike that has sheared off. And it's a steel, and it's probably a hardened steel bolt. And as you can imagine, I probably went flip. So I did my research. I didn't do enough research as it turned out. So I realised that you could drill them out. So the end wasn't flush. Anyway, I tried to drill it out. To paraphrase the story, it took me 10 weeks and cost me about £100 in drill bits. This thing was breaking titanium nitride drill bits. It was breaking cobalt drill bits. And I was thinking, oh my god, I'm going to have to drop the engine out to take it to a professional to have this bloody bolt taken out. Over time, and I managed to buy a drill bit from America, which is a milling drill bit, and basically over time I managed to grind it away, and it was 10 weeks. It was 10 weeks of getting bits in my face, bits in my eye, being under a bike. I ended up having to lean the bike up against a wall, and I gradually ground it out to the point where I actually could drill it out, which was really quite scary because you don't want to take out the thread. Anyway, I did it, and it was 10 weeks, and it was hard graft, and I was determined not to let this thing beat me. Which is why I call the end of the bolt Bronson, because he was so bloody hard. Right, fast forward 2 weeks ago, exactly the same situation, albeit it was a steel bolt in the clutch mechanism of the TL, and you're like, oh god. But I'd learned from that 10-week experience that I'd done the whole thing wrong. I'd missed, I didn't do a step, which had I done it, would have made my life that much easier. That step was 2 things. You take a Dremel tool and you flatten off the bolt, so it's a flat or nearly flat surface. You then take a center punch, and as close as you can, you center punch a tiny divot in the middle. That gives the drill bit something to hold on to. By doing that, I probably would have saved, let's say it was 20 hours, I probably would have saved 19 and a half hours, because it took me 10 minutes to take this drill bit out. Now, I see the whole situation with Bronson as a learning experience. It was, and that's what you have to do. You make mistakes and you learn. So I hope that people watch these videos, and I hope people will sometimes find them funny. I hope people find them informative. Some of them people will get bored by, and that's fine. I don't mean to be boring. I kind of witter. I have the same thing with my son. He witters to me. It drives me up the wall, but I love him. So there we go. But what I really want people to get out of it is to go, do you know what? I could try that. That thing I want to do on my car or my bike, I'll give it a try. It's not that difficult. Have a look online. I like looking at stuff online to go, oh, what can I do with this? A few years back, built my own set of Bluetooth headphones. Do you know what? Bloody easy, cost less than a tenner. And all you had to do was be able to solder, nothing more. All the rest of it was like bits of Lego sticking it together. So I hope people get something from it. My next video will be about Big Tasty, and I'm hoping it'll be outside. I was going to show you around my garage, but it's too messy. So look forward to seeing you soon. No, I don't want to say that because this is a one-way conversation. I hope this is more of an introduction. I know it's video number 3. But I hope people get where I'm coming from, and I hope over time people get something from it and it helps people. Okay, thank you. Bye.